All right, here we are on April 9th talking about Rod Rosentein and problems. Wow, guys. So big things happening all over and tons more Q posts. I can't even keep up with this stuff. So here we go. Let's dig into some of the recent news and getting into what's happening with Q. So you look at this. This is a Sarah A. Carter, one of my favorite sites, right? She's breaking something all the time. But here's the political theater. So this new appointment was made that because of all the slow walking of the Clinton docs. And look at this. Deputy A.G. Rosentein comes under congressional fire. Wow. If you look at this really, Rosenstein's now finally getting heavy congressional pressure for the terrible job he's doing, because we know he's stonewalling. We know he's slow walking, right?
Many times before, Secretary Clinton's non-government server arrangement prevented the State Department from complying with the Freedom of Information Act. Now remember, he's saying this publicly on the floor. Hillary Rodham Clinton used a private server to avoid the law that requires archiving federal records. That's an important point. This is the first time publicly that the Senate Judiciary Committee head makes the case for motive to deceive all investigations in the public on the floor. And this was still during the presidential election. This is months before the election. Not covered. So this private emailing server is designed to wall her email off from the normal treatment of government oversight, as is required by law. The Inspector General found that Secretary Clinton failed to surrender all official emails to the department prior to leaving government service. Again, violation of law. The Inspector General found that Secretary Clinton's email practices, quote, did not comply with the department's policies that were implemented in accordance with the Federal Records Act. In other words, Clinton violated the law despite what Comey's going to say. So the Hillary Rodham Clinton staff also failed to comply with department policy and record laws. They routinely conducted State Department business on personal email accounts. And so on July 5th, 2016, Grassley runs down the Senate floor right after FBI Director Comey gives his famous "Hillary was careless, but no reasonable prosecutor would bring prosecution against her." Right. Grassley ran onto the Senate floor immediately, reacted to his statement, and here's what he says. While Director Comey made it clear that Secretary Clinton and her staff were extremely careless in handling classified information, he also recommended no criminal prosecution, even though gross negligence regarding classified information is a crime. If it wants to avoid giving the impression that the FBI was pulling punches, because many people in a similar situation would face some sort of consequence, the agency must now be more transparent than ever in releasing information gathered during its investigation. Interesting. And we're going to go through how they tried to avoid the transparency even more. But this time they're being policed. Okay, now everybody's watching. They're on the clock. So what they've been getting away with for years, they're no longer getting away with because they're watching it. But here's the interesting way he did it. Grassley did it this way. He said, there are plenty of FOIA and congressional requests that are pending in my office. They have been on hold because of the ongoing nature of the investigation. So now, based on Comey's speech, I expect the FBI should respond fully and completely to all of them. Did they? No. They ignored them. Great evidence is now being aggregated. So now Grassley comes out on the floor and talks about, in July 6th in a letter, that he starts to lay out his case against Comey and Lynch handling of the Hillary Clinton email matter. And again, this letter goes unresponded because they were waiting. They were going to ride it out till she got elected and sweep it all under the rug. So this is a key element to Grassley's oversight strategy. He generates a paper trail of demand letters for information. When those demands are unmet, he then returns it to the IG. There goes the cycle of information of them working together. The problem is the IG has been blocked by the Obama administration, and this is why Grassley worked so hard to restore the IG Act. So in August of 2016, you started hearing about Clinton Foundation corruption. Uranium One becomes a story. Grassley sends out a letter to Lynch and Comey and wants to know why the DOJ isn't investigating those two stories. And of course, it goes unresponded. So then you start hearing about a response that is not a response directly, but a response indirectly through legal. And this is what they started calling the open secret of cover-up called bundling. So this is when Grassley and Johnson and ISA and Gates, a lot of started referring to this in late 2017 called bundling of information to avoid release to IG requests. So remember, Comey's starting to run out of time. All right, he's trying to run out the clock with Lynch in the following way. He doesn't respond directly. So what he does do is through legal, they start bundling unclassified documents with classified documents in order they not be separated. So Comey violated the law with regards to this in EO 13526, and he would do this again for the Iran deal in September. He just couldn't put down the shovel when it came to digging his own grave. Again, the hubris of these people. So by doing this bundling, he was using another tactic of red taping and stalling tactic to try to ride this out till she came into office. The problem is she didn't win. And they had all of this evidence. So now we're in late 2016 and Grassley talks about the unusual secrecy. He talks about the Wilkinson letters and the unusual secrecy. The FBI improperly bundled, this is on the floor, him talking, these unclassified reports with a very small amount of classified information and told the Senate and the Judiciary Committee to treat it all as classified. Clever, but illegal and improper, which of course is a pattern at the FBI at the top for years. So they fired off letters. Now the letters to the Department of Justice from Grassley that I've given you says from the attorney Beth Wilkinson on behalf of her clients Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson in what becomes known as the Wilkinson letters. The Wilkinson letters were dated about June 2016. And they were mostly incorporated by reference into the immunity agreements for Ms. Mills and Ms. Samuelson related to the FBI's criminal investigation of former Secretary Clinton's email server.
Mr. Chairman, Director, in your opening comments, you said this was an unusual case. I would say that's the understatement of the year. Husband of the subject meets with the Attorney General 3 days before Secretary Clinton is interviewed by the FBI. 9 people get to sit in with Secretary Clinton during that interview. One of those was her Chief of Staff, Cheryl Mills, who was the subject of the investigation. 5 people get some kind of immunity. 5 people get some kind of immunity, yet no one is prosecuted. 3 of those people who get immunity take the 5th in front of Congress, and one of them doesn't even bother to show up when he's subpoenaed. Supposed to have been at that very chair you're sitting at. And of course, the Attorney General announces that she's going to follow your recommendations, even though she doesn't know what those recommendations are, the only time she's ever done that. So, of course, this was an unusual. We've never seen anything like this.
At the conclusion of that investigation, it was apparently Strzok who changed the FBI's description of what Hillary did from grossly negligent to extremely careless. Now, the first description is a crime, the second merely a blunder. So, in effect, Peter Strzok exonerated Hillary Clinton in the middle of a presidential campaign. But then he kept going. Strzok went on to sign the document, the official document that opened an investigation into Russian meddling in the election. The very same investigation the Hillary campaign was calling for at the time. So you can see why Strzok's politically charged text to his mistress might matter at this point. What exactly did Strzok say in those texts? We still don't know the answer to that because, for reasons it will not even explain, the FBI won't tell Congress. So all the way back in August, the House Intelligence Committee sent a subpoena to the FBI asking for, among other things, information on why Peter Strzok was removed from Mueller's team. But instead of replying, the FBI simply stonewalled and said nothing. Well, that's not just infuriating, it's unconstitutional because the FBI is not its own government. It's a single agency within the executive branch of our federal government. It's accountable to, among others, the United States Congress, and therefore accountable to voters. Keep in mind, nobody elected Peter Strzok to anything. You elect members of Congress to keep people like Peter Strzok in line. Now, when people like Peter Strzok decide that Congress has no power over them, they're giving you the finger, and they're threatening democracy. That should not be allowed. And yet, amazingly, it's common. It happens literally all the time in Washington. Last summer, for example, Congress sought basic information about the infamous Trump dossier. Did the FBI pay for it or part of it? Did FBI agents believe the contents or use them to drive their Russia investigation? These are basic and central questions, and yet the FBI just ignored them. They didn't feel like answering, and they rarely do. Back in 2015, 2 Islamic extremists attempted to shoot up a Muhammad cartoon contest in Garland, Texas. Remember that? Later, it emerged that an undercover FBI agent knew the two shooters personally and had even egged them on to, quote, tear up Texas. That agent even traveled with the terrorists to the scene at Garland, was present right before the attack, and tried to flee as it began. It's hard to believe that actually happened in America, but it did happen. You'd probably like to know why it happened, wouldn't you? Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin would like to know. He's repeatedly asked the FBI to explain why it shielded terrorists, how it could have failed to stop the shooting that happened later. And yet he still doesn't know. Senator Johnson's requests repeatedly have been stonewalled by the FBI. A year before that, in 2014, Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma asked the Justice Department information about the gun that the Tsarnaev brothers used to kill a police officer right after the Boston bombing. He never received an answer to that question. We could go on. There are many examples of this, but the point is clear. The FBI is out of control, and not just in the Trump investigation, but much more broadly. An agency charged with enforcing the law clearly considers itself above the law. And that's a threat to you and every American, no matter who you voted for. On what pretext could the FBI be denying these texts to Congress?
It's very difficult to see how they have any basis for denying Congress access to this data. Congress has a right to that data. They can receive it. They have to receive it. I think what's going on at the Bureau right now is very, very serious. It's very depressing for a former federal law enforcement official. This is not your mother's FBI. What's wrong with the FBI is not the average everyday agent. They're great. It's the management at the FBI that is the problem.
Remember when we heard about these immunities, we were all ticked off. Like, why are people getting immunity deals? So Grassley continues in his letter to Attorney General Lynch. I want to express our concern about the process by which Congress was allowed to view the Wilkinson letters, that the letters inappropriately restrict the scope of the FBI's investigation, and that the FBI inexplicably agreed to destroy the laptops knowing that the content were the subject of congressional subpoenas and preservation letters. This is basically accusing them of obstruction of justice publicly, okay? So due to the non-response from Lynch's office in late 2016, Grassley calls on the IG's office in Horowitz to investigate the FBI and Department of Justice improper handling of the Clinton investigation. Note, attached letter to Horowitz. In that letter to Horowitz, this is what Grassley said. The entire matter is in desperate need of independent, objective, and nonpartisan oversight. As the Inspector General, that is your statutory duty. End of sentence. Attached, please find 2 previous letters that I sent to the FBI that went unanswered. But these guys were really fighting a corrupt system. And in my eyes, they're heroes. And there are some heroes in Washington. I know it's hard to believe, but there are. And you're going to find out more and more about it as this starts to get laid out. So now we're getting into the 2017 and the end of 2016, where Grassley starts waging this methodical campaign against the corruption in FBI and DOJ. Now, again, we started this corruption investigation with the oversight role that he has of FOIA and FOIA requests and the non-compliance of these requests. Now this investigation has grown into further investigation of the other behaviors of the FBI and DOJ with respect to obstruction. So he starts to write some letters and starts involving Horowitz. And in that protracted war that he had to get his power back, he won that in large part due to Grassley's efforts. So Horowitz is united with Grassley when it comes to oversight. Horowitz has never in the last 3 years shown any signs of evidence of letting Grassley and the SJC down. That's why I call them heroes. They're doing this at their own personal peril. Remember, personal peril is real when you're going up against the Clintons, okay? We all know that when you go up against the Clintons, something always happens. Let's see, you end up dead. Okay, this is some serious effort with a lot of risk to their own personal well-being. We all know that. So I don't think calling them heroes is overstated. Or now we're in early 2017. So now we got the newly empowered IG working with the SJC, and all of the investigation is starting to aggregate all of these documents. Now, the initial focus ranged from the FBI's handling of the Clinton email, whether or not Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe should have recused from the investigation, Ostensibly over 700,000. His wife campaigned that we've learned from Charles recently. It's over 1 million.
Yep.
They took from Terry and McAuliffe around the time of the email investigation to any and all potential collusion with the Clinton campaign and the timing of various FOIA releases. Keep in mind that the IG has reported finding to Grassley and Goodlatte because they're the ones that had launched the investigation request. By law and rule, he has to do what the committee requests. So the IG investigation creates an information cycle with that information flowing through the Department of State's IG. Grassley knows this, which is why he shifts gears to lay the foundation for more and more questions and more release of documents. What you saw is a pattern. Senate Judiciary Committee, request to the IG reporting back to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the IG's report being made public and people talking about it on the floor. That cycle is what's has led us up to this FISA memo. It's all part of a coordinated cycle of effort through the Senate Judiciary Committee and the efforts of Grassley. Mm-hmm. Now, remember, we still had to deal with Comey. It's 2017, Trump's in, but Comey's still in office, but not for much longer. Remember, in March of 2017, something became known as the Christopher Steele created dossier.
Right.
Grassley opened 2017 sequence of demand letters with a huge letter announcement. It's become known as the 12 questions for Comey letter. He lines out all these questions about how the FBI handled the things related to the dossier. You know, were there any government officials, inside or outside, had anything to do with it? Were there any agreements and payments? You know, who all was involved? How did the FBI first obtain the dossier? Who was it that put it out, etc.? Now, in 2017, Grassley zeroes in on McCabe, our famous McCabe. Knowing that Andy recused himself from the Clinton investigation, Grassley wants to know about his involvement with the Trump investigation with the letter that involved 12 questions. Now, remember, this is Comey's response he's waiting on. On March 28, 2017, he says, to the best of your knowledge, has anyone within the FBI filed a complaint with the Department of Justice or the Inspector General regarding McCabe's involvement in the investigation? Have personnel from the Department of Justice Office of the IG spoken with you as yet as part of the OIG, of the office's investigation into Mr. McCabe's alleged conflict of interest into the Clinton investigation? Now, has anyone at FBI, the Department of Justice, or the Department of Justice Office of the IG recommended or requested that Mr. McCabe recuse himself from the investigation of Mr. Trump's associates or from any ongoing investigations of the Clinton Foundation? If so, what action was taken in response? So these were specifically lined out, and of course, Comey never responded. Now, what did happen, because Comey didn't respond to the March Steele inquiries and the Grassley letters and the questions, what came out was we started hearing new information about Steele and Fusion GPS.
We told you all along that nothing in the Nunes memo would surprise you. Nothing would surprise you if you followed along to what we were saying. Now, let me tell you something right off the back. I know this sounds like I'm patting myself and ourselves on the back, but I am. Because we told you this. While everybody else was futzing around with the story, while everybody else was approximating what was going on, we told you precisely what was happening. Fruit of the poisonous tree, FISA judges being mad, what this meant, using the dossier as the basis for it, knowingly going to a federal judge and a series of judges and basically asking or providing that the bases of warrants were being made and being used and being platformed on information that you knew was tenuous at best. This is beyond earth-shattering, mind-boggling. Heads are going to roll. Wait till the contempt citations, the orders to show cause. But let's go through this very, very simply. And I'm going to do the following. And this is going to be your one-stop shopping place to find out exactly what happened. And let me go through it and explain a little bit about how this thing works and parts of the order and the FISA memo that is important, and why you should, in particular, pay close attention to this. Now, You've read it. And when you read it, as I said, I'm doing it again, gratuitously and admittedly, we said this before. The memo basically provides an indictment of senior Republican officials, GOP officials, DOJ officials, FBI officials of inappropriately and, I submit, unlawfully using biased and unreliable information and opposition research and testimony from shady characters, all involving then U.S. citizen and candidate Donald Trump, to obtain surveillance warrants to violate the privacy of Trump, his team, his transition team, and the like, as part of a federal conspiracy.
Corrupt second tier of FBI officials, the lesser-known names behind Loretta Lynch, Comey, Yates, McCabe, are the actual Department of Justice and FBI officials who carried out Operation Trump. See, that's consistent with what I say in Killing the Deep State, that this was a cabal organized in the FBI and the Department of Justice, a coup d'etat, a treasonous coup d'etat. A small group of conspirators are not actually political appointees. This specific group is about 25 to 30 ideologically minded career officials who were behind the official political appointees. If you want to understand the small group or scheme team, don't look at the person at the top, Mueller, who assembled the special counselor team. Look instead at former FBI Chief Legal Counsel James Baker. So he's identifying Baker as the chief conspirator. After Prosecutor Hoover began his criminal investigation, Baker was removed from responsibility inside the FBI, but still exists within the organization without a specific role or position, likely because he's cooperating with the federal prosecutor and the inspector general. He's showing up at the office doing something irrelevant while investigative officials monitor his contact network. Okay, now, that's the whole idea behind, that's why the same people behind phase one, which he considers the Clinton exoneration, which was 2015, 2016, and phase two, opposition research, counterinsurgents, and surveillance against Trump, which went through 2017, became the same people in phase three, the post-election vast Russian-Trump collision conspiracy known as the insurance policy. Okay, and that's how the coup d'etat emerged, saying with the political appointees changing out, small group needed a cover story to retain the professional association and carry out phase three. The special counsel became that cover story. That's why so much political intelligence, community, and media capital was expended December 16th through May 17th to generate the demand from both Republicans and Democrats. The team already existed. The objectives already existed. The only thing needed was a willfully blind leader, an excuse. Robert Mueller became that willfully blind leader because a small group already knew him and could manipulate him, use him. I doubt Mueller has much of an idea what his team does. They bring things to him, he signs them, they go about their tasks regardless of his appearance. Now he's saying that it doesn't excuse Mueller, and he's not stupid. He's what Conservative Treehouse says, he can see the ridiculous nature of the Russian conspiracy collision narrative. He'd have been actually an idiot if he didn't see it, not just a rhetorical one. Although the existence of dementia, absent that, he's willingly going along with the fraud. The globalists, both Republican and Democrat, have become traitorous. They didn't believe in America anymore. And they were going through a series of steps that would benefit themselves financially, selling America. The free trade agreements, the debt to China, all the ways we were allowing the wealth of the nation to be dissipated in these global arrangements. This conspiracy that was launched and hatched in the Department of Justice had its focus to prevent Trump from being president. And it was largely a Democratic plot with Obama and Hillary wanting to have this coup d'etat 16 years. But the globalist Republicans, Ryan, McConnell, Rubio, all the ones who opposed Trump were standing by, encouraging the traitors on. And Trump ran against the Republican Party. He was not running with the Republican Party. He still today doesn't even have the full support of the Republican Party. And that's a good thing, in my opinion, because otherwise he himself would have been compromised. And I think it's really, eye-opening to look at it through this perspective, that there's so much more going on below the surface, like QAnon has consistently said, that we're out there sometimes thinking nothing's happening, and we're not realizing the extent to which the below the surface is producing what's going to become, a great awakening and a great reckoning once we get the full picture into the public, both of what Trump is doing and what the corruption inside of Mueller's team is.
To promote an investigation into this make-believe, highly imaginary, fictive, false, fraudulent Trump campaign and collusion nonsense. Now, according to this document, the information from this Steele dossier, and I've been saying this, that this garbage, this pack of lies, to give it the name dossier, goes to show you the first psyop that was evolved. I don't call it basically a pile of lies. Call it a dossier. It's so James Bond-esque. It's a dossier. And the dossier, and it became a part of our argot, our lexicon, and we referred to this rag, this pulp fiction, as a dossier, and even that elevated it to a status of repute that was not warranted. But the information was, number one, essential to the procurement and the acquisition of surveillance warrants against the Trump campaign and Carter Page. And it claims, the memo, that then Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who is toast. The question is, how do we get that pension away from him? You traitor, you seditious traitor, you're a crook. You used our agency, our Department of Justice, the irony of that, the Department of Justice, FBI, you thought you could get away with it, didn't you? Remember that song Joe Text? I gotcha. You thought you could...
I gotcha. You thought you got away from me, didn't you? You thought I didn't see you now, didn't you?
You just assumed you've been doing this for so long. We're deep state. We got nothing to worry about. We don't need no stinking warrants or any of that stuff. We just do it the old-fashioned way. We just do it. The memo alleges and states that the political origins of the dossier, political is honorable. This isn't political. This is biased. This is political in its most rank and rancid aspects. But the political bases of the dossier, paid for by Hillary Clinton, the DNC, were not disclosed to the secret FISA court who signed off on this. This secret FISA court, manned by federal judges, lifetime appointees, lifetime tenure. You can't get rid of them unless you impeach them. And impeaching a judge is tough. It happens. And they get really pissed off when they're lied to. They get really upset when they're lied to by the Department of Justice, of all people. Wait until the orders to show cause are issued. The orders to show cause, where you are ordered to show cause why you and your agency, department, should not be held in contempt. Why you explain to us, why did you not lie to us? Tell me why this is not a lie. Why you swore under oath as an officer of the court and a sworn constitutional officer, in essence. How you lied. How am I to look at this any other way? Why would I be wrong if I were to say you lied to me? You perjured yourself. You know the expression, why are you making a federal case out of this? You're going to find out what that means. You're going to find out about what the word federal case means. These guys are on another platform, okay? Another. You think judges are badasses? Federal judges? This case? You made a mockery of the FISA court. 35,000 applications from 1979 to 2013, and 12 were denied? The rubber stamp days are over. Turn in your rubber stamps, my friend. Now, this memo also claims that the FBI had clear evidence, quote unquote, that the author of this dossier, I'll call it dossier so you know what I'm talking about, former British spy, British secret agent Christopher Steele, was profoundly biased against Trump, prejudiced against Trump, and should not have been in any way considered legitimate or valid for purposes of granting this warrant, search warrant. It did not explain to the court that this bias existed. Steele then told Bruce Orr, who was the then Assistant Deputy Attorney General, that he was, quote, desperate. These are the words from the memo. Quote, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected, and was passionate about him not being president. And you didn't tell the FISA court that this was the guy who wrote the dossier, that this explains his bias, his rancid worldview? You don't think this is relevant? Oh my God. Heads will roll. Federal heads will roll from federal judges. Steele was a longtime FBI source who was paid over $160,000 by the DNC and Clinton campaign. Why? Why are they paying for him to come up? And they didn't really go into the basics of the dossier, what it said and everything. But why are they? What judge would say, you never told me that this warrant that I'm signing against Trump, in essence, was from a dude who was paid by Hillary Clinton to come up with the information that you base this warrant on? Are you kidding me? You never told us that? Steele was a longtime FBI source, rat. It was paid over $160K, as we say, by the DNC Clinton company, via the law firm Perkins Coie and research firm GPS to obtain derogatory information on Trump's ties to Russia. Steele was a longtime FBI source who was paid over $160,000 by the DNC and Clinton campaign via the law firm Perkins Coie. Remember, Eric Schmidt helped that laundering. Eric Schmidt, Google, Alphabet, the same Eric Schmidt who quit the day after Trump signed that executive order, saying that assets and other bad stuff, including incarceration, would follow those individuals involved in human trafficking and the like. Oh, can you see this rat's nest, this Gordian knot? Just, What follows is what some have called the damning section, as there was no reason not to disclose or explain or highlight the relationship between Clinton and Steele, unless those involved were afraid that exposing a clear political link may be a problem. You see, a judge has to look at the basis and bases of the formation of this warrant. Who is this confidential informant, or CI as they're called? Who is it? Tell me a little bit about it, because you're finding a probable cause, or my finding a probable cause, must take into consideration the evidence by which you have presented. Quote, neither the initial application in October of 2016 nor any of the renewals disclose or reference the source of the DNC, Clinton campaign, or any party or campaign in funding Steele's efforts, even though the political origins of the Steele dossier were then known to senior DOJ and FBI officials. They just said, we have this man, former British intel officer, Christopher Steele, Your Honor. Here, sign. Who is he? A guy. Anything I should know about him? Former British intel. Yeah, we know that. Anything special? Anything that would disqualify? Anything that would cause me to doubt the credibility of his evidence? Well, not really. Okay, you sure about that? Yes, judges. B, this is a quote. The initial FISA application notes that Steele was working for a named U.S. person, but does not name Fusion GPS and principal Glenn Simpson, who was paid by a U.S. law firm, Perkins Coie, representing the DNC. Even though it was known by the DOJ at the time that political actors were involved with the Steele dossier. The application does not mention Steele was ultimately working on behalf of and paid by the DNC and Clinton campaign, or that the FBI had separately authorized payment to Steele for the same information. Take this one to the bank. Remember this moment only. Remember this sentence if you remember one thing. Remember this one. The application does not mention Steele was ultimately working on behalf of and paid for by DNC and Clinton Foundation, or that the FBI had separately authorized payment to Steele for the same information. The FBI is paying for this. The FBI, DNC, Hillary Clinton, and you? Why are you paying for information? I had separately authorized payment to Steele for the same information. Because I remember reading that one a while back, and I thought, and I never saw it again. I thought, wow, maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe I misunderstood that one. Apparently not. Now, the section that I referred to makes a very interesting, and I think a substantial case to be made, and a very good argument for releasing and letting the public know the underlying FISA application, and I would venture to say the raw data as well, as either the Clinton connection was disclosed or it wasn't, which apparently does not seem to be a fact or a position that anybody could refute. What's really interesting to note and this is again one of the many, many points of the memorandum. In order to verify, to corroborate, to validate the positions of the dossier, this Nunes memo indicates that the FBI, quote, extensively cited a news article in order to corroborate the dossier to the court. The FBI used an article that was based entirely on the dossier. In effect, using, now are you sitting down? Using the dossier to corroborate the dossier, using Steele to corroborate Steele, using the evidence, it's so because I say so, or, Your Honor, we have as a basis for this an expert witness. Okay, and what do you have to indicate that he's an expert witness? Well, this article that he wrote saying he's an expert witness. Okay. This is so sloppy. This is a bunch of people who figured they're not going to find out. Remember, over 34,000 warrants, applications, 12 were denied. Did they get, these people don't read anything. Plus, we're the FBI, and we're at the highest levels. I'm McCabe. Excuse me. You're asking me to tell the judge to corroborate the evidence of the dossier by using the dossier? What? Yeah, do it. Why? Because we're deep state. Now you know why we call them the deep state. 'Cause we do it deep. I don't know what that meant. Now, this is the quote. The Carter Page FISA application also cited exclusively a September 23rd, 2016 Yahoo News. Jesus. What was the Onion unavailable? Yahoo News article by Michael Isikoff, which focuses on Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow. Oh, why didn't you say so? Moscow, huh? That's usually the tripwire for... The article does not corroborate the Steele dossier because it is derived from information that was leaked by Steele himself to Yahoo News. The article does not corroborate the Steele dossier because the article is derived from information leaked by Steele to Yahoo News. The Steele dossier was the linchpin, the foundation, the most important part for securing this initial warrant for Carter Page. The Steele dossier, number one. Number two, the legitimacy of the Steele dossier and Mr. Steele were never made known to the court. Number three, the source of payment for the dossier and Mr. Steele was from the DNC, was from the Clinton Foundation, and later on from the FBI, none of which was told to a judge or to any of the judges. None of this. An article from Yahoo News was listed as a basis of corroborating the dossier, which cites the dossier. If this is proven to be violation of either sworn testimony, misrepresentation to the court, aside from being perjury, contempt of court, civil and criminal violations anent said contempt. But if you can show that this was the first part that got the ball rolling, this was everything.
Grassley's March questions still stand, and he continues to send more requests with questions that are going unanswered. Again, they now cannot get away with not answering because the excuse back then was, we're just going to wait for her to get in office.
Right.
They're just continuing the same behavior with hubris, but there's going to be repercussions. You cannot ignore the Senate Judiciary Committee, but they did. So what we see is clearly a transition like that witnessed in 2016, where Grassley transitioned from the Clinton to the FBI DOJ's handling of Clinton. Now he's looking into how the FBI handled the Steele dossier. So now it's May, and Grassley's setting his sights on Rosentein. So just 72 hours after assuming his new and temporary head of the FBI position after Comey was fired, Rosentein gets buried with all those unanswered questions that everyone was ignoring. And typical Grassley, he fires letters and goes to the floor. And here now Lynch has run out the clock, but the questions for the DOJ remains. So Grassley is primary DOJ oversight with an empowered IG backing him up. So the only thing that'll get him off the back of the Department of Justice is some satisfactory answers from them or the IG. And guess what? They didn't get them. So Goodlatte and Grassley decide to throw out what's called the cloud of doubt hangs over the FBI. And most people didn't notice it at the time, but it led to something. May 3rd, 2017, the cloud of doubt hangs over the FBI letter. And guess what? Grassley off his opening statement with info on Steele dossier, Fusion GPS, and guess what? A week later, Comey's fired. As a result of that letter and presentation, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. So now we're in June of 2017, and we're in the FISA applications. Now we're leading up to current events. Grassley followed up his March 6th demand letter to Comey with one to Rosentein and McCabe, zeroing in on classified FBI FISA application and FISC documents. So now in July of 2017, Grassley called on the Department of Justice to appoint a special counsel, detailing their concerns in 14 questions pertaining to actions taken by previously public figures like Lynch, Comey, and Clinton. The questions range from things like Loretta Lynch directed Mr. Comey to mislead the American people, Secretary Clinton's mishandling of classified information, mishandling of her email investigation, Department of Justice failure to impanel a grand jury, questions about the Clinton Foundation, Uranium One, FBI relying on the Trump-Russia dossier created by Fusion GPS, and so on, to request the FISA court approval of the Trump spying. Now we're getting close to the end. Now we're in August of 2017. So Grassley flips the Russian narrative, and Grassley released sworn testimony from Bill Browder. Remember, Bill Browder testified of Fusion GPS that they took money from the Russian government, and second, that it did so while it was working on the Steele dossier, which completely switches the Russian collusion argument, because the truth is, what little elements of Russia involvement in this entire case was actually being on the side of Clinton and the corrupt DOJ officials along with Christopher Steele. So now Grassley fires off a letter on August 30th to FBI Director Wray on the drafting of Comey's statement exonerating Hillary. So Grassley uses testimony from Comey's Chief of Staff Rybicki and a Department of Justice lawyer confirming the FBI statement was crafted before Clinton and 16 others were even interviewed. Remember that. So now this letter is a key document. Everything needed to appoint a special counsel is contained with it. The letters preceding it were all precursors, and the ones after were add-ons. In my opinion, all the OIG has to do now is reinforce that letter, and a special counsel will be appointed. So now the Senate Judiciary Committee, starting in September and October, kept repeating their call to the Department of Justice for a special counsel, pointing out that former FBI Director James Comey lied to Congress when he said that he decided not to recommend criminal charges against Clinton until after she was interviewed. Now we know, when in fact Comey had drafted her exoneration before said interview. What I've been told is when they did the interview with Clinton, it was to go over all of the ways that they were going to handle it in advance. You know, kind of two buddies getting together, okay, here's how we're going to handle this. Okay, this is what's going to come out to the public. It was a joke. So now we're in late 2017, early 2018, and Horowitz and Grassley and the Senate Judiciary Committee have now joined forces with a new FBI director, Christopher Wray. Now, here's how I know these indictments are real and the perp walks are coming, okay? Here's what we're going to lay out. If you remember, we discussed previously that Wray testified to the committee. Remember that testimony, okay? It wasn't covered very well, in my opinion, in both levels of media, independent or mainstream. So I want to quote some things that he said. Now, this is what he said to Congress in following statements. This is Wray. We will evaluate what the IG finds, end quote. Wray also says we, the FBI and DOJ, would have to take steps in response. Have to. Not might. Have to. So if they have to take, that's why I believe these indictments are real. Wray also made some other statements that foreshadow, okay? Talking about the Hillary Clinton investigation, we talked about this in presentation 1. We will have to assess, now this is him quoted, what else might need to be done to unring that bell, if you will, he said. So it depends a lot on the particulars of what the IG found. I would not rule out anything appropriate that would be in response to the Inspector General's findings. Jason and Joe, that's not double talk. That's direct answer. That is not Comey speak. That is foretelling what the intentions are of the FBI white hats. Wray, on multiple occasions, expressed his readiness to take action in response to the findings of the IG. And he looked forward, he said, to Horowitz's findings. He even continued to say, we will not hesitate to hold people accountable after there has been an appropriate investigation, independent and objective by the IG, into the handling of the prior matter. Based on that, I will look at all available remedies.
Doctor, would you say that the sort of quick removal of Andrew McCabe was the first real indicator that Christopher Wray is in fact making good on his statements?
No, I would say that was the second. I think Rubicki resigning and lawyering up was the first. I think that was the first big domino to fall.
And we just spoke about that last night.
Remember how many people lawyered up that day when Rubicki lawyered up, all of a sudden a bunch of people lawyered up. Comey, Obama, that all happened on the same day. All right, so let's wrap this up. There are statements on the record under oath, statements that make it abundantly clear that Christopher Wray is going to use the OIG findings and recommendations of the IG to clean up the FBI. So let's talk about what's happening right now. Remember, the OIG dropped off a report of their investigation on Friday late on January 12th. And then a few days later, we get the Nunes FISA memo and the 702 abuses. Now, this is all within the same week, okay? It was created from the findings of that original April 2017 investigation, and that was combined with a recent OIG report. So now the OIG report can tie all of this together, as it will solidify requests by congressional committees, while also satisfying a legal requirement for the DOJ to impartially appoint a special counsel on certain individuals, but also bring direct indictments on their subordinates. So this OIG report from Horowitz was completed and presented, and now Congress has reviewed that report. So the House and Senate Judiciary Committees began to use it to supplement their own individual investigation. That's what Nunes FISA 702 program menu is about. It is using the OIG report to supplement that investigation. So that's the first one to drop. So this is going to result in hearings with the end goal of requesting or demanding a special counsel investigation. The DOJ could appoint a special counsel at any point, or they could wait for Congress to demand one. If a request for special counsel is ignored, Congress can pass legislation to force the appointment. Now, this is why the Department of Justice response is critical. Wray says he will follow the recommendations and bring investigations and changes to policy in the FBI, in the both personnel and procedures, and even it went into reopening of prior investigations. In short, just about everything. Why is that important, Jason and Joe? Because the immunity agreements that were forged back then can also be rescinded. Right. That's big. Yeah. So now This week, think about this week. You've got these black hats in the FBI and DOJ firing off a couple of days later with this memo being announced that the text messages between our super agent wannabe Strzok and his girlfriend Paige have suddenly gone missing. But who comes to the rescue? But our lawman hero Horowitz. Remember, he responded publicly. He announced that his office received him, and later he announced that OIG was in the process of retrieving him publicly through his IG team, leading to an announcement they were being located when we were back on track. Guys, that was huge. So for anybody that's doubting the information that we're putting out today or doubting Horowitz is real, explain what I just said. That doesn't sound like a paper tiger. That sounds like a real working lawman going after corruption. Matter of fact, to me, in the last 2.5 years, I find no evidence to support that Horowitz is still part of the Swamp Club. I don't know why. I don't know what changed, but all signs are leading to him and Grassley bringing it all down. The house cleaning is now in order. If you need some proof, go look on his Twitter page. Michael Horowitz on January 25th said the following: consistent with the OIG's practice, I look forward to providing the department, Congress, and the public, and he capitalized the words, the public, with a report detailing our findings of the missing text. Does that sound like a swamp creature? He is fighting the swamp tooth and nail. Horowitz is absolutely fighting them, and we've proven it. We've laid out our evidence for the last 3 years, okay? Horowitz, for some reason, is fighting against his old lawyer buddies. I do not know why, and I honestly don't care. But Horowitz is fighting with his kitchen cabinet members, the White Hats and DOJ, alongside Sessions, Wray, and the Trump administration. And what I'm telling you is the Department of Justice can act on the OIG report and investigate and prosecute themselves without a special counsel, but that's highly unlikely, in my opinion, because Congress would not stand for that, because it's too political a climate. Too much politics at play to allow that to happen. They need public displays, and both sides want them because they think that they can manipulate and maneuver publicly to fight back every time some bombshell comes out in that public display or reporting of a special counsel. So the IG report drops, Nunes memo comes out a few days later, and now we have lawyering up by everybody. Everybody's got a lawyer. Comey, Ribicki, Obama, McCabe, Rosentein is next. Horowitz and Nunes and their findings in the IG investigation report and this 4-page memo, they're naming names, guys. They're naming names and recommendations of indictment. All roads lead to the White House. And here's what the grenade I'm going to lob to you, Joe. You're going to catch it in your lap. The White House was using the same illegal email, private server, and NGO oversight to avoid FOIA requests, just like Hillary.
Yeah.
The memo is the beginning of that information being made public eventually. There's my grenade.
The memo was? Didn't WikiLeaks say something like Cheryl Mills was emailing John Podesta that Obama has emails from Hillary that don't have state.gov email addresses?
That's correct. It's commonplace. Everybody's doing it. Selling access to your corporate sponsors and trying to avoid FOIA detection is the way of the world in the past 8 years, even going further. And it's all going to come out because the FOIA request investigations lead to illegal emails, illegal servers by lots of these guys, including the president.
And this article goes over a lot of detail about it that you got to hear show more. And you will really get a ton of detail down below here. There's one paragraph I wanted to read. This is one of this is a quote by, what is that? Genova, right? Basically said that Wray and Rosentein are responsible for the delays and should be held in contempt, and they're being really serious, right? And this is John Lash, a person that was just appointed to basically go make sure Wray and Rosentein are doing their jobs. And it says Rosentein has stolen 15 months of Donald Trump's presidency because he didn't want the responsibility of having the case in the Justice Department, and he illegally appointed a special counsel because he didn't have any evidence of a crime. He knows better than that. The whole thing has been a political stench to it because of the cowardice of Rosentein. So pretty heavy words starting to come out. And it's really true. It's illegal to go chase a person for a crime. You have to have a crime already, or the evidence, and they didn't have that evidence. It was all false evidence they used. So tons of crimes. It's all going to be coming out. We're going to dig into these problems that Rosentein has, and so I think there's going to be more and more leaks that are coming out from like the State Department, such as Clapper and such as Brennan, and then Rosenstein's going to be kind of shown as the orchestrator of a ton of this. Obviously, Page and the Stroke text messages are just damning, and more of them are coming out. But they literally 1.2 million documents given to the IG, and the Congress has got less than 300,000 of them, right? So it's really, or 3,000 of them, roughly 3,000 of 1.2 million. So the slow walking is horrible, and it's all going to come out in public, and it's going to be glorious when these criminals are exposed even more, right? So Sarah A. Carter is a great site to go to. Now, let's dig into some Q. Tons of Q posts. This is 1091. We talked about this last time. So if you look at, and this is on the 8th, later that night after I went off the air. Knowing what you know now, watch this again. And this was, again, this is the famous video from Trump that talked about all the corruption that really got him elected, right? And if you go look at that, it's a glorious thing to go take that 7 or 8 minutes to go look back at that great video. I think you really enjoy it.